All right, welcome everybody to my session. It is titled Plan for Tomorrow. It's about project management and TechCom fundamentals. I'm Bernard Ashwanden. In the next 50 minutes or so, we're covering this, which I'm not going to read to you because it's basically the outline that is in the materials rewritten into sentence form so that it fits onto a slide and looks like I have an agenda. I am a past president of the STC and the founder of a company called Publishing Smarter. We really try to help companies and teams make the case that content is the core business asset. And I think that was spoken to this morning in the keynote. It's something that I hope all of us firmly believe and that we can champion at the different businesses that we work at. There are 10 different knowledge areas by order in the PMBOK guide, the project management body of knowledge. My wife, Vivian, is a PM. She works at IBM, has been there for many years in this role, and has gone through and put together a really good slide deck on this information, which I now have in front of me. I've reworked it a little bit with her in order to make it relevant to TechCom, in order to update the content a little bit, and in order to present it here. So hopefully everything comes through as being useful. I'm going to give you a little bit of background into each of these, try to summarize what they mean in the PMBOK side of things for those who are not familiar with it, and then try to connect it to the TechCom and say, look, here's your job. These are the types of things that we need to be doing. I am a firm believer, not only in ripping off the slides that somebody else created and using them for my own purposes, but ripping off the best practices of other organizations and using them for our own purposes. I think it's a really important thing for us to learn from others. There was a shout out at the back about ripping stuff off from others and using it for your own purpose. Yeah. Nice. All right. I'll take it. PMI has something called Pulse of the Profession. It's a global survey of project, program, and portfolio managers, or if you prefer, project managers. I can speak Canadian and American. It charts major trends in the field. If you scan that QR code, and I'll leave it up there for a second, it does have the full link at the bottom, but it's a connection to the PDF of their document. This document goes into a decent amount of detail, but it also has some nice charts and graphs. It clearly presents a lot of the information, and it talks about where they find success, and they call them champion organizations, those that are doing very well in comparison to the, I guess, the laggards in the industry. And I just want to point out a couple of different things in it. They see that 80% or more of projects that are delivered on time or on budget and meet business intents do so by managing time and resources well. They are maturing their project talent, the capabilities, and the culture. They're reinvesting in their people. They're making sure that if policy and procedure is broken, they're fixing it. We write policy and procedure. We help fix that. We help create training materials. There is a definite overlap in what we do. They also find that no single factor is driving success, and that smart organizations understand that the proven project management practices lead to greater success and far less waste. And that's not just waste or success in strict dollars and cents. That can be broadly expanded to things like success in mental health, because people aren't stressing nearly as much if things are well managed. It can be success in the business looking positive to their customers because they deliver on time, or if they're in a position where they cannot deliver on time, they are making a clear presentation on what the issues are. And I'll talk about a couple of things related to all of these as we move forward. I suggest that in the technical communications world that we borrow their ideas and their successes. This was one of the few graphics that I grabbed and put in here. Basically, good, bad, good stuff. If people are working in an organization that has a higher maturity model that they're following, projects are completed on time, within budget, and meet the goals. If not, then their percentage of projects experience scope creep is higher, the percentage of projects that are deemed failures are higher, and the budget lost when a project fails is higher. So if you need to make a case, there's a nice slide that you can go back and talk to a little bit.
Bernard?
Yes?
One of the things that just seems to stand out to me on the screen here is the fact that not everybody is making their projects, getting their projects done on time. I look at 64%, that's a terrible rate.
Yeah, so the question was, it looks like, and correct me if I'm getting it incorrect, it looks like even the success, the 64% that are completed on time, still isn't a great number, but it is the 64 to 36. So in this case, it does total up to the 100, and it could be that it's completed on time. It could be that the ones that are not completed on time, and I don't have the exact breakdown of what the 36 is, so I'm speculating. It could be that the projects that are not being completed on time are still delivered within an allowable time frame. It could be that those meet client expectations when the client turns around and says, I need more. Well, now the project is not delivered on time, but the adjustment to the project is being made because of a client demand. So I don't know for certain why 36% is in there, but it is possible that some of that demand for change in a project that puts it off of the time is coming from the client side, or it's coming from inside the organization, but it's being justified because they have the metrics or the information in order to drive pushing back the project. As a for example, one of the things that my wife has done in the past, which I think is fantastic, if you ever want a really good idea for how to manage anything that you're doing from a TechCom standpoint, do one of these. You set out your plan. You know when you build your initial outline and then you build the table of contents and you turn around and you say to people, here's the stuff I'm going to write about, and everybody says, yeah, that looks good. And then they turn around 3 months, 6 months, whatever later, and they say, oh, you didn't include this, that, and the other thing. So here's the suggestion. You put together your outline, your plan, you present it, and you get everybody to sign off and say, yes, that's what we are expecting. These are the timeframes we're willing to give you. You make sure they're reasonable in your estimate, and you track that. And now here's the great part. Somebody comes along later and says, oh, we need to add another chapter on risk management. Then you go back and you say, yep, no problem. Here is the calendar of everything that's being done, and you lay out your document in front of them. And you say, everything that's in blue is your department. Now, you want me to add a chapter on risk management, and based on my estimate, that's going to add 3 weeks to the project. You pick any 3 weeks worth of stuff we're doing for you that we'll remove, and we'll put that in instead. And then they go, well, you can't do that. We need all of it. You go, yeah, okay, no problem. I gotcha. Can't take anything out. We got 3 extra weeks. That 3 extra weeks is going to cost us $60,000 worth of resources because based on this, we're spending $20,000 a week. So all you need to do is give me an extra $60,000. I will bring in more resources. I will get your 3 weeks put into here. And they go, we don't have budget. We can't give you more money. And you go, oh, okay. So you won't take anything out and you won't give me any money. So here's the solution. What we're going to do is we're going to take the entire project that's here and we're just going to add 3 weeks to the end of it in order to do the piece on risk management that you want me to put in there. And all you need to do is go to the client and tell them we're going to be delayed 3 weeks in delivery because earlier on I didn't properly scope out the project. And then they go, well, no, I can't do that. And then you come back with one more suggestion and you say, all right, what we can do is deliver exactly what we said we would deliver. We will include that extra component in the release notes after the fact, or we will take a piece that you have and move it to the release notes if you think that the risk management content is more important. And yes, it will shift off the project, and yes, it will shift off the budget, but it buys us some time. Because the one thing you should not be doing is going in and saying, yeah, let's shoehorn more stuff in here and get people to work overtime. That's not a solution. That doesn't help your company. That doesn't turn around and give real metrics on how long it takes and how many people are involved. And if you can turn around and have that information, even if it's for the next project, and you frame it in a positive way with the person, the stakeholder who says, hey, I need an extra 3 weeks, you can build a good relationship so that the next time around, you get more input, you have more flexibility, and you can go back to your own management or your own customers and say, look, here's how we handle things internally when there is project creep, because it happens. Scope changes. So that was a bit of a longer answer, but okay, perfect. So key phrases in the report that I thought stood out, and I'm not going to read everything on it, but this, the chief executive of IPA said, the vision is communicated effectively. I looked for some of the communication pieces that were in it. PMO is the project management office. Directors and executive leaders find that their role is expanding. Sound familiar? The role is expanding, you're doing more. In their case, they are becoming communicators. And they know that communicators are always clear and concise, no matter the audience. Know your audience and deliver the right amount of information. By the way, if you're tweeting this stuff, I've got @Ashwanden for STC. The other is they're being leveraged in improving communication organization between the organization and customers. We do those things. Half of the champions, the companies that excel, digital transformation is having a major impact. The ability to learn, understand, apply, and keep up with technology as the most needed skill. We do that. Communications, 22%. It was one of the top things that they said they have as other skills on their team that make a difference. 4 out of 5, about 80%. Soft skills, communications are more important today than they were just 5 years ago. And again, effective project sponsors use their influence to communicate the project's alignment to what the company is trying to achieve. So finally, an organization should understand the link between projects and strategy and have a culture that includes emphasizing communication and knowledge transfer. So of the projects started in the organization in the past 12 months that were deemed failures, what were the primary cause? Number 5, 29%, pretty much tied for 4th, inadequate or poor communication. That means you can get another department on side. You can start to go through and say, look, we can help with the communications aspect of what we do as a business, and the project management team looks good. And then you start to build your network inside the organization. You continue to have influence in your business. So what are the 10 knowledge areas? That's what I'm going to go into next. And I'll hit up each of them with an idea of here's what it is according to PMI, and here's some information. Integration management. Primarily concerned with making choices about where to concentrate resources and effort on any given day, anticipating potential issues, dealing with these issues before they become critical, and coordinating work for the overall project good. So basically, going through, knowing the other areas, don't feel concerned when there's 9 more coming up and you're supposed to know all of these. It's relatively easy to put them together. There's 10, you can fit it onto a single sheet of paper as big picture ideas. We do this type of stuff. As I go through, you're going to recognize several of these as areas that you work. Now, to make everything happen, we have to pull these other 9 pieces together, and that's what we're doing on the integration management side. The good news, you're probably already doing a lot of this unconsciously without being aware of it. But if we aren't aware of the management aspects of our documentation projects, we're going to start to skip steps and compromise quality, fall victim to things like scope creep, get ambushed because some out-of-the-loop stakeholder comes in and says, wait, what about what I need? And again, these should all feel familiar. These are things that you likely run into. There isn't just one way to manage all of your projects either. There are different approaches that different organizations are going to take, but your job generally is to pull together the activities from all the other knowledge areas, the next 9 slides, in order to make a project a success. And documentation is a project. Scope management, primarily concerned with defining and controlling what is and is not included in the project, right? When somebody comes along and says, I need you to add a chapter on risk management, is that included in the project? Is it something that was signed off on? If we can't clearly define the requirements and what the need is that we're filling with our project, then we're in trouble of missing the whole point of the project. We open ourselves up again to scope creep, to dissatisfied customers and stakeholders, and inevitably we end up missing our schedule. From the laws of project management, and I'll read this one here word for word. If content is allowed to change freely, the rate of change will exceed the rate of progress. I just looked around the room and everybody's sort of giggling and nodding their head. As I said, we do this, but we can talk to people in project management using their terms from their gospel text. They have the PMBOK. We can reference this information. So nail down the content deliverables, and if you don't, others are going to define it for you. Know what it is you're delivering, have everybody sign off so that you have a clear scope of what your need is for documentation. Ensure the project includes all the work required, but only the work required, right? The idea, again, deliver only what is required. Don't over-deliver. No one wants to read the complete and all-inclusive guide to working with Microsoft Word in any version on Windows or Mac, because that tome will be about the size of a print copy of an encyclopedia set. Yes, question.
So how do customer expectations fit into this?
How do customer expectations fit into this? On the scope management, you will have different teams. So you may have depending on what you're doing, you may have a product manager who communicates with customers and says, what are the customer requirements? For argument's sakes, I work with the Adobe FrameMaker team. So they will reach out to several customers and they say, what are you doing in regards to structured content? Or what are you doing in regards to publishing? And when customers start to say, we need to be able to create an app, we need to be able to create HTML5 output, and we need better support for table customization. Now the product managers go back and they start to look at what is the amount of development time that they have available, how many developers do they have, how long are the estimates in order to create the different functions that are being requested. They start to scope out the project. You will get that with all kinds of different teams inside organizations, but if you can use their information, this becomes a really big one for scope management. If you have a good relationship with that product manager or whoever it is that you're working with that helps set the overall goal of a project, you can say, all right, you estimate that this will require 1.5 years start to end. In that 1.5 years, you estimate that we need to create these sets of documentation. I will now decide how much content we can create, and you can get a little bit of a connection between your estimate and theirs. Moving forward, you can then compare your success against the previous estimates. Don't ever throw away your old numbers. Take your old numbers and use them as a guideline. If you know that when your customer makes requests for things that your developers believe take 6 months to code, and that you require, say, 4 months once the initial code is written, then it's a 1-year project start to end in order to deliver. And if they scope creep from the 6 months to 8 months, you can say, well, you know what, we need about 2/3, so we've got to add on another 5 weeks. I think that was the number I have in my head for 2/3 of 2 months. So if you can get that information from the customer into the various groups, and really your customer at times becomes your product development team because they want to include your documentation in what it is that they deliver. Time and schedule management, primarily concerned with accomplishing with a timely completion of the project. Laws of project management, I like this one. A carelessly planned project will take 3 times longer to complete than expected. A carefully planned project will only take twice as long. For the keeners, you could divide this up into a couple of different subsections as well. Completing the project means that you have to put stuff into an order. You can't just proof a document. It has to be written first. So as you work your way through, figure out who is available to work on the project based on the required skill level and abilities. You may require a senior writer. Is a senior technical writer in your organization going to be available 3 months from now when you need that individual? You want to estimate the number of work periods required to complete all the activities. If, for argument's sakes, you do things in sprints, if you're doing things where you say, no, we only have availability for people in 2-week cycles, if it turns out you can only grab a remote resource from 9 p.m. until 9 a.m. your local time because they work on the other side of the planet, those might be things that you need to be aware of. IBM, where my wife works, has a global team. Her team works in part in China. So they will work literally through the night, our time, and it means that 24 hours a day something is happening in order to move a project ahead. But they need to know about the availability. They need to know in a project team, when is the Chinese New Year and how does that holiday impact the North American side of things? Today, any Canadians in the room? Yeah, happy long weekend. Yeah. Today is our long weekend Monday, and for the Americans in the room, you get one next Monday. So having that awareness. Right, yeah. You don't have to worry what's going on at work today. Yeah, it's one less day that you'll have to catch up on when you come back from the conference. So having an awareness of those different things, putting together a schedule with the milestones, the handover dates, keeping the schedule under control. That's what you're looking at in time and schedule management. So you're identifying the activities, putting them into a sequence. Again, the idea, you can't proofread all of the content until all of the content is created. And if the content is created in a modular way, you can say this piece is finished writing, it can be proofread, and now you can have some writers continuing to write and proofreaders starting before you say, here's all 300 pages of our finished content. You can start to translate content if you know that it is final and approved, potentially before all of the other content is written. So you can have multiple teams working at the same time instead of having to wait until someone has completely done one job and then a next group is completely done the next job. Whoops. Estimate the time requirements and the resources in order to complete these, and then schedule everything. And that gives you the sign off where everybody comes along and says, yes, this is who is going to be available and when. And again, if somebody comes along and says, you don't have access to the translator you need in order to create the German content, obviously ask why. If it turns out that someone is ill, that there has been a death in the family, if it turns out someone is off on paternity leave, whatever the cause might be, you have the opportunity to plan and to say, all right, some of these things we can take into consideration next time around, and we can make sure that we have a larger pool of translators. Or maybe the vendor that you're dealing with is a sole proprietorship with one person who does all of the translation, and your organization has grown to the point where you need 15 different languages, and that one person isn't able to keep up. Now, you may still want to retain that individual in order to keep the German translation going, or in order to review or to help with it, but you can also work with a larger organization. If you switch over to a larger organization, you can absolutely work with them in order to try to dictate some friendly terms in regards to the contractors you've worked with in the past as well. Put something in there that says, look, we've worked with this specific German translator for 8 years. We have a good relationship. She totally understands our product, knows our audience, and if we're going to work with you as a translation firm, we want to make sure that you continue to pay her at least what she's making now, if not more. And we understand that that's going to be a cost, and that gets built into the larger overall project to manage our 15 languages. Somebody comes to me with those terms and they say, I'm going to bring you 15 different languages of translation and it's going to work out to $250,000 a quarter. Yeah, I'll hire on the other translator that you want me to bring in, assuming that there's a culture fit, et cetera, et cetera. And if not, I will try to negotiate with the client and explain why it is that there's an issue. Cost management. This is one that sort of drives me crazy because planning, estimating, budgeting, and controlling the costs, right? Making sure that everything's completed within the approved budget. It doesn't mean your budget is reasonable or realistic. It just means having to work within the budget that you're given. That can be tricky. The cost estimate and the budgeting, especially into things like time or people on a smaller project, is also a bigger risk. If you're dealing with $1 million budget and you have a year to deal with it and you're a smaller organization and somebody hands you $1 million, you have a bit more flexibility at times than if somebody comes along and says, can you do this in a day for $250? Because if it turns out that it takes you 50% longer, you're out half a day. If it turns out that you've got a year and you realize you're out by a week or two, and that's going to impact the bottom line by $10,000 or $20,000 over that week, maybe you can say at the 6 months, hey, we're off by a week. What can we do in order to make up for it? And you can start to make your adjustments earlier. Now, cost management on our side, figure out what is the actual project budget that you have and figure out how does it work across all of the different things that you have to do. And is there anything that's going to create variances? Are they a client that is likely to introduce some risk because they like coming along and adding new modules to what you have to write, and they do it last minute? Do they have subject matter experts who go in and say, no, you've got to include every single thing that is possible to do inside the application, even if you're writing an introductory guide or a tutorial for a brand new user? There is a pretty broad life cycle cost as well. So the project could have things like the cost of using, maintaining, or supporting the product long-term, such as your tech support. Do they draw on your documentation team's work? Limiting the number of design reviewers, for example, can reduce the overall cost of the project, but there could be a related expense. You're not doing as much design review, you're not doing as much quality control, and now the customer's operating costs or your support costs go up. So you need to be able to work with a project management team in order to balance this and know who all the different players are. So just checking in, is this resonating? Does that feel like the types of things either that you're already doing or a couple of things where you say, yeah, you know what, if we incorporate this as well, it'll make things flow smoother when we're doing our documentation? So far, so good? Okay, good. Quality management. I love this one. Primarily concerned with the project satisfying the needs for which it was undertaken. So I'm just checking my notes here because I mentioned this one when I do my TechCom programs for some of the colleges I teach at. So quality, and I want to give you the definition of quality here. The degree to which a set of inherent characteristics fulfill requirements. Did it do what it said it would do? Now, how many people think McDonald's puts out a quality cheeseburger? Quick hands up. Really? 1, 2, 3 people. Okay, think about it. I didn't say, is it tasty? Is it nutritious? I'm asking, when you go to a McDonald's and you say you want a cheeseburger, do you get a consistent product where all of the characteristics fulfill the exact requirements you have whenever you go to a McDonald's anywhere in North America or in the world and you say, I want a cheeseburger? Do they fulfill the stated requirement? Is the McDonald's cheeseburger a quality product? By which I mean, do you almost always get exactly the same thing when you say, I want a cheeseburger at a McDonald's? How many people feel they almost always get the exact same thing? Most of the hands go up. It doesn't matter if it is considered to be good or wholesome. Everything has to do with them doing what they said they would do. Now, I've gone through the drive-thru before. I've ordered my cheeseburger and fries. I order it with no onions and no pickles. I drive away, continue on. There's onions or pickles. Now, when that happens, I have gone to a different McDonald's and gone in, and they say, sorry about that, here you go. Overall, that's a quality organization. They stand behind what they do, even if a different franchise is at fault. And I found that to be something that makes them far more of a reputable organization from a quality delivery standpoint. So quality and grade are not always the same. Low quality has always been a problem, but low grade might not be provided it was intended. So a Big Mac could be considered high quality. Again, you get to the same types of things, but it's not necessarily high grade tomato or high grade lettuce, or you're getting an onion that's reconstituted from dried or whatever it might be. Yes, question.
Doesn't the customer define quality?
The customer can define quality for sure as part of a project. And we need to identify what those quality standards are. So the general customer, and I'm using the McDonald's example as a little bit of a loose one, but by and large, anyone that goes to a McDonald's and orders a Big Mac expects that they're going to get, anybody remember the Big Mac thing, right? 2-quarter pound.
All beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun.
And you get that.
But that could be on a polo rack.
Right. Yeah, you could definitely turn around and define your quality. So the job that we have in the TechCom side is to go in and make sure that they're relevant to what we're doing. If the customer says we want HTML5 for a mobile device, well, what mobile devices? How many do you want me to test it on? Because I'll test it on any device you want if it's within budget. I'll test it on an Android phone, on an Apple phone, on a desktop machine. But at a certain point, do you need me to still test it on Internet 4 on Windows 95? Hopefully, no. Just checking in here. So if we intend to measure quality, we have to plan documents and define what it is we'll deliver. So for example, the number and the priority level of bugs that we'll fix, the use cases, specific use cases that we're going to meet, the number of tutorials that we're going to create, the features that we want to capture. We also need to identify the goals that we'll achieve and what the time frame is for this. Now, without it, we end up stuck not being able to measure quality. We can't turn around and say, yeah, we were able to deliver what you expect. And if the customers expect a document that has some typographical and grammatical errors in it, and they're okay with that as long as it's technically accurate, then great. Maybe we can take more technical reference information directly from the subject matter expert and include it into the delivery. If they expect, because for argument's sake, you're dealing with an airline, they expect procedural information that is 100% accurate in every single regard of what's being done, then there's going to be a higher cost associated. But because we have the FAA regulatory needs to make sure that the documentation is delivered in a certain way, there is a higher cost associated with it. Part of the cost of every airplane that goes out the door is documentation, and it should be, because what they do is by and large a life and death situation if a part fails. Depends on what the part is, it depends on when and how it fails. There are critical failures, like having an engine fail on you when you're in flight. And there are failures that are not that big of an issue, relatively speaking, such as the seat won't remain upright. You can lock out that seat. You don't put anyone into it. You bump them from a flight. You apologize. You give them a voucher. You ask for a volunteer. Assuming you're not United, you handle it well. Sorry, anyone from United in the room? I just realized I recorded that. All right. Oh, by the way, there is another comment in here that I want to mention. So quality is all about a process, not the end product. The project management rule of thumb: if you aren't getting the results you want, change the process. We're creating crappy PDF. It reflows our content all the time, and we don't get the page layout that we want, and our graphics look really pixelated. I don't understand why my Microsoft Word 2003 output is not good PDF. Perhaps it is because you are using Microsoft Word 2003. Maybe you should be considering an upgrade to the software, an upgrade to the process. The best way to build in quality is to develop a repeatable process. Upgrade your software, upgrade your skills. Get your people to interact with your customers. Those are some of the things that you can change around in order to get input on what works and what doesn't, in order to understand which tools work and which ones don't. The ideal process for achieving quality is a plan, do, check, and act environment. Plan for something, do it. Check the results, act on any change that is required, and redevelop your plan, and then do what you've planned, and then check it, and then act on the results. So, 4 questions. Are we doing the right thing? That's your plan. Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing things correctly? Are we actually going in and doing what we should be in the right way? How do we know that we're doing the right thing and we're doing it the right way? That's where your check comes into play. And what do we do about it? That's your act. So just to recap, are we doing the right thing is your plan. Are we doing things right? That's when you're doing it. How do we know? That's when you check it. And what do we do about it? That's when you're acting. Human resource management, HR management, primarily concerned with processes that organize and manage the team. Ensure early involvement through the planning process. Identify the different roles that are required along the way. Clarify the reporting structure. That's a big one. The number of times I go into a client, and one of the things we have to find out, who's actually allowed to make the decision? Is the decision maker in the room when we're having a conversation? Or is the decision maker somebody who is going to actively listen to what you have to say and respect you enough to make the change? Because if it turns out you're in an organization where people aren't paying attention to what you have to say, maybe you should look at another organization. Because if they don't trust the employees that they've brought in to bring realistic requirements to management, maybe it's time to look elsewhere. Anyone who's ever been a team leader in here? Just a quick show of hands. Okay. If you've been a team leader, if you've worked on documentation projects with other writers, these activities should seem familiar. If you haven't had them as a requirement for you, then somebody else has. And the next time it might end up being you. Any loan writers? All right, for the loan writers, you still work in a team. You must, because somebody's paying you for what you're writing. Unless you're just, I don't know, tweeting haikus about TechComm or something, in which case, I got nothing for you. I got nothing for you. I can't. You'll have to submit the number of person hours that you put in to complete a project. There might be an option of reducing the project duration. If you have to bring in another body to the team, you need to be able to justify that. So at the beginning of every single project, make it clear, if it isn't already clear, to whom you report your status. Know who you answer to. And sometimes it's nice to know who that person answers to as well. Not necessarily to be able to go over their head, although Elon Musk is supporting that idea at Tesla. He says, and he just hired on 2 Canadians to be general troubleshooters. He said, we're going to have a hackathon in order to find a couple of solutions to problems. 2 engineering interns he personally hired on after their solutions. They were able to go direct. Could you imagine? You're in Tesla and you can just go straight to Elon Musk with the solution. So it's good to know, who do you answer to and who do they answer to? And if there's a respectful communication within the organization, there should be zero concern if somebody says, yeah, and if you're not able to get what you need from me, feel free to go over my head if I'm away. If you don't like the answer that I give, and you need more justification and you feel that my information wasn't what you need, because I should trust the people who work for me to come to me and say, here is an issue. They should trust that I will look after them to give an answer. And my boss should trust me to do a good job, which means that the people who answer to me, if they do go to my boss, should by and large have really positive things about me that are going to be said and have a question about something specific. And my boss should trust me to hire people that won't go to my boss in order to annoy her with a bunch of questions that aren't relevant. Trust me to do my job. The best client that I've ever worked with for an individual was a guy. I wonder if he'll ever hear about this. His name is Ron Kreider. He was out in San Jose. He was retired from Sun Microsystems. Retired. He was hired on by a company that was doing chip testing. They would take chips and basically see how much can we put through these? How fast can a chip run before it gets destroyed? How long can it run, etc. So Ron is retired. He was probably in his late 50s when I met him. And big guy, drives his pickup truck, picks me up. We go into the office. I talked to him a couple of times. I said, so how did you end up with this job? He said, well, a guy called him up and said, look, we need somebody with your skill set to come in and rework our documentation team. We're currently losing money with every manual we turn out. I want you to turn it around within 2 to 3 years and make it into a profit center. And Ron said, all right, sounds interesting. He got the scope of what he was allowed to do. This was his first day on the job. He walks in and he hands his new boss a manila 9x12 envelope with the little string that you wrap around it. His boss says, what's this? Ron says, open it up. The guy opens it up. He pulls it out, gives it a read through. And he looks at Ron. He says, what the hell is this? Ron says, that's a resignation letter. The guy says, yeah, why? He says, well, you'll notice there's no date. I gave you a resignation letter. You hired me on to run this team, to turn it around and to do it within 2 to 3 years. You're in charge of my budget. So you tell me how much money I have to work with, and we've already agreed on that. Now stay the hell out of my way and let me spend it. Let me build up the team. And anytime you want to override one of my decisions, you just fill the date in on the top of that thing. He turned it around in under 9 months. But he had the freedom to do it, and he had the trust. So HR was absolutely there. They found the right people. They empowered them to make decisions. So make it abundantly clear who you report to, what your status is within the organization. If you're in charge of collecting the status of the other writers, make sure that you have the information on everyone on your team. And if you have a dedicated project manager, give them a very quick synopsis of the skill set that you're bringing to the table. Now the project manager that you're working with knows exactly who is coming to the table to do the job. If you're a senior writer, you also are likely going to have to mentor other writers, or at least ramp up others if it's the first time that they've worked with you. And again, this all falls to human resources. Communications management, primarily concerned with ensuring the timely and appropriate generation, collection, and distribution, as well as storage, retrieval, and ultimate disposition of project information. That's content management. Communications management. Anyone who goes in and has expectations. There was a conversation about client expectations. Can the client set what they consider to be quality? This is a good place where it comes into play. Clients are going to play a huge part in project success. If we plan and define what it is that we're going to deliver, and we communicate it to the stakeholders often as well, not just once up at the front. Continue to tell them, this is where we are. This is why we're here. This is what we've committed to deliver to you. This is how we're getting there. We are now 60% of the way through the project. We are about 60% of the way through our budget in time and in resources. We are on schedule. Clients are not surprised with what they get in the end. No one is surprised when they get a cheeseburger at McDonald's or a Big Mac, because they're getting what they expect. Change requests are reduced. Quality complaints are reduced. Calls for overtime are reduced. Fewer stakeholder issues exist that need to be resolved. There's fewer disruptions to any given project because of communication. In summary, it's about managing the client's expectations. At the core of any successful project is our ability to influence people and to communicate with them. That's core to what we do. That one alone should be able to win over anyone in the project management side. Your job is to figure out who are the stakeholders, who are the people with a vested interest, what do they need? You then need to distribute the information that you have that's required to them. Give them a report on where you are. Resolve any issues that they feel still exist. 3 more to go. We have about 10 minutes left. Is that right? Perfect. Risk management. Primarily, I'm smiling. You can't see it on the video, but I'm smiling because I'm looking over at my notes. Risk management primarily concerned with risk identification, analysis, responses, and monitoring and control on a project. From the laws of project management, Murphy is alive and well in your projects. Definition of a risk. A project risk is an uncertain event or a condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or a negative effect, right? There's positive risk, there's negative risk. If it impacts what's going to happen on a project objective, then your schedule, your cost, your scope, or your quality are going to be affected. So the goal is to manage the risk in a way to decrease the likelihood of a negative impact on a project and increase the likelihood of positive impacts, like finishing early. That would be nice. Cutting the costs, also good, and maintaining quality. There is a broad range of risk that's present in every single project. There is a risk. It is a small risk, but there is a risk that if we are having a conference at a given location, and how many people here know Jack Molisani from LavaCon, right? Jack ran his very first conference ever in Hawaii in October in 2001. There was a bit of a delay in traffic after September. So when you start to plan things, there are major risks that may never come to fruition, but you should have at least some awareness. How many people in here expect that on their drive home from the airport to their house that they're going to have a car accident? One. Sorry. Statistically, you're still okay. How many people have car insurance just in case? Right? Every hand. Who's driving without car insurance? So you manage the risk. You find ways to manage it. Some of that management is done through knowing more people. That's one of the great things about building your STC network. You get to know other people who can help you find answers. You manage it through financial means by going out and getting insurance, or by setting aside a percentage of every budget on a project in order to make sure you have the funds if you do need to add 3 weeks because somebody comes along and says, we forgot to give you a chunk of information. And I used risk management in the earlier example. Risk management is making sure that you have the resources if somebody comes back and says, we need you to write about risk management, and they didn't tell you about it. Every restaurant has, I didn't know this until I'm friends with a guy that owns a restaurant near where I live right now, and he has a percentage of his budget set aside for people who complain about their food, and he has to replace the meal. He said the other day somebody came in and they complained about everything to the tune of almost $200. Yeah. I said, that's great. Make sure somebody snaps a picture and puts it up so that they're not allowed back in the restaurant. Yeah. And the complaints were unreasonable. Absolutely unreasonable. I met the guy because I complained about one of the meals we got. We went in for my birthday. My mom had ordered the fish. I got the steak and the ribs. I thought it was fantastic. She said the fish was a bit dry. She didn't finish it all. He came by, young guy, he's 24, he owns the restaurant. He comes by and he says, how was everything? I said, almost everything was great. I explained about the fish. He apologized. He said, dessert's on me. Then he gave us 2 $20 gift cards as well. We've probably gone back at least once a month since then because he handled it well. The next time we went in a week later for my mom's birthday. She said, let's go back there and see what happened. So we went back, greets us by name, all of us, 5 of us in the party. And that was just good risk management because he could have turned around and said, sorry about that, and walked away, or not said anything. And either we don't comment on it publicly, or you post a poor review, or you tell your friends, don't bother going there. So risk, it's present everywhere. Projects could have a historically good track record. You feel confident about that. Projects that have a smaller or manageable scope, you'll feel confident about. A team of people who are experienced, again, you feel good about these things. But a project is also unique. You've got to be aware that each of them is different from the previous. So ignoring risk is the same as accepting it, which is an altogether different thing than avoiding it. Not talking about risk is a little bit like crossing the street without looking both ways because you've never been hit by a car before. If you walk through and you see the KPMG stuff out there, there's an entire pop-up display that they have on risk. Every time I walk by it, I think of this slide. So risk exists if the scope is poorly defined. One of the previous slides talked scope. Scheduled targets are not well planned or communicated. Previous slide. Skills are inadequate. Performance targets are difficult to achieve. The environment is a complex one. That should all sound familiar. All of our projects have that kind of risk in them. So we've got to decrease the probability and the impact of a negative event on a project. So make sure stakeholders don't suddenly show up at the end wondering why a feature was never documented. Show them what you're documenting. Get them to sign off on it and understand what the content is. It increases the likelihood of a positive outcome if you manage risk. You may finish early, you may end up maintaining the quality or coming in under budget. So risk management isn't guessing what's going wrong. You also have to analyze the impact and the probability of whether or not it's worth having a backup plan just in case. Develop a game plan if the risk does occur and monitor the risk throughout the project duration. You can't just define the risk either, but you have to figure out what is the trigger, what causes this, so that you know if the risk is likely to occur. And the for example that's here is an interesting one. It says, if you live in California and the ground begins to shake, that's a trigger to the risk event that a building might collapse. We had a presentation we did for a client in Ottawa on the Adobe AEM component content management system. During the presentation, I said, there's a lot of background noise. It's difficult to hear what you're saying. He says, oh, sorry, yeah, that's the alarm system in the building because we've had an earthquake. So I said, do you need to leave? He says, well, probably not, but they want us to. So leave. He says, all right, I'll be back in a bit. So we're sitting in the room. I'm on Twitter, and I'm getting the immediate, earthquake, et cetera, et cetera. And it was, I think, 2 a.m. in India. He leaves the building, comes back about 15 minutes later. He says, yeah, the building's secure. They're letting us back in. He starts presenting right where he left off. No concern, no issue. And then aftershocks. The alarm goes off. He says, I got to go again. Comes back in. If you had walked into the meeting one sentence after he returned for having left twice during an earthquake, you would have thought, it's just another demo. It was effortless. He picked up right where he left off. That was fantastic. So risk management, earthquakes in tech comm are a real possibility. Procurement management, purchasing or acquiring the product, service, results that you need from outside of a team. So you need to figure out what are the tools or the training that you need. And that's something you can do here at the conference. You can talk to the vendors. You can go to the sessions. At the sessions, you're learning. Take that back and say, hey, look, when I go to the conference, it is risk management. It is worth us being at the conference. It becomes a value add to the organization. So this is all of the administration of contracts, purchase orders. Senior writers, team leads, document managers may have to look after some of this stuff you may have in your organization. Specific people who interview contractors, hire and monitor their work, arrange for training, make sure that hardware arrives on time, make sure you get what you've paid for in the software. These are things to monitor and report back on, but it's not something that we have nearly as much impact as some of the others. And the last, number 10, stakeholder management. This is the biggie. The value in clear communication with stakeholders can't be oversold. The most current PMI pulse of the profession for 2018 finds stakeholder management and support for a project as priceless. Actively engaged executive sponsors will help the organization bridge the communications gap that exists between the influencers and the implementers. And that will significantly increase the collaboration and support, boost project success rates, and reduce risk. If you can get your CEO on board, if you can get any C-level executive, if you can get your director on board, if you can get your manager on board, if you can get multiple product managers on board, what you have is people who have influence and they start to support what it is that you're looking to do. Analysis by PMI shows that the dominant driver of a project meeting the original goal is an actively engaged sponsor. So make sure that the stakeholders are involved. Organizations with a higher percentage of projects with actively engaged executive sponsors say 40% more projects are successful. So if you get people involved, 1 in 4 organizations will tell you that the opposite. If you have an inadequate sponsor, it is the primary cause of a failed project. So know who's impacted within and outside of your organization. Keep them looped in on what's happening. You can read more. You can go to the PMI site and read about stakeholder management plan. A couple more quick numbers. 41% of the underperformers say that inadequate sponsor support is a primary cause of failure. 17% of champions, give or take 2 to 1. If you have somebody on board that's going to support you and is in a position of authority, you'll succeed. A simple status meeting might just give you a chance to take 2 or 3 minutes to say everything's going well. But you can also take that 2 or 3 minutes in order to truly report in. Keep the discussion simple and clean and to the point, but discuss the areas of concern, as well as the areas where you've had success. Take advantage when you're talking to your stakeholders to tell them, this is what we need, these are where the areas of concern are, but also tell them, and here's what we've done that's successful. Show them that they have value in having you on a team. Make them understand how it is that whether it's a project manager or a technical communicator, that we're involved in every single one of these categories. Project management's put a lot of time, the PMI has put a lot of time, a lot of money into this over the years. One of the things that they've done, this is my second last slide, they've implemented certification. 72% of the project management office leaders feel that certification is relevant for the mid-career level project managers. They have certifications that have ongoing professional development, allow project managers to evolve, enhance, and grow a variety of skills, including the technical, the leadership, and the digital skills. This should sound familiar. How many people in here have looked at or worked on their certification for STC, have a familiarity with it? There's several people who attended a session here in order to get certified. STC brought in certification. It was something that I was really, really happy to have been involved in when I was president. I had said at the time that certification needs to move ahead. And in my first meeting, I said, and if it doesn't, I'm going to make a motion at my very last meeting to permanently kill certification. I can make any motion. Doesn't mean anyone will second it. If it does get seconded and it goes to a conversation, it doesn't mean anyone will vote on it, but I was able to start off by saying, if we don't have something in place by the end of the year, I'm going to move to kill it, because why are we putting our effort into it? And now we have it, and we have people who are coming through certification. The current certification is something that I think is ideal for anyone who's newer to TechComm. The mid-level and the more senior side of things is also being developed. So if you have the opportunity in the exhibit hall, there is a display area. You can talk. I know Alan Hauser's here. I know Beth Agnew is here. So there's a couple of people who also teach the certification. Lastly, on my end, from a business standpoint, we really do use the principles of project management. We help companies create content, manage the content, and deliver it to their client. In order to do so, we help them socialize. And that's not just social media. That's having the active conversation. Have your support people talk to your customers. Have them talk to your technical communications team. Have everybody communicate with each other, socialize internally as well, and then listen to what's being said so that you can improve what you're doing. That's it on my side. I have a couple of business cards that I'll leave up at the front. I will tweet a link to the video of this session for anyone who would like a copy of it, and I will also include information on the slides. If there are any questions, I'll take those as well, but I won't put them into the video.